welcome to a new episode of Athletics for Life podcast. Today, a very special guest for all of you. But first, we have to thank our sponsors.
Yeah, so we want to just take a moment to thank Collegepro, our sponsor. They've hooked us up with some clothing, and they're going to send some new stuff pretty soon, which is awesome. For any athletic directors or schools out there that are maybe looking for some new uniforms or some shirts for tournaments, they're a great company to work with out of China. So check the link in the description below, or if you have any questions, you can contact us directly. And just another thank you to Collegepro. They've been great to work with.
And we have a lot of new merchandise coming soon. So if you're interested in a shirt or a pants or a cap or a jacket, please contact us. So now we're going over to our guest. We're going to introduce him. We are very honored and excited to have Dr. Richard Young on the Athletics for Life podcast today. A while ago, I had the privilege to follow one of Mr. Young's webinars called High Potential to High Performance, Faster and Simpler. That's the webinar title. If you want to follow that, please, more information later in the podcast. After that, we had a personal chat and about sports in general and high performance.
So today we're looking forward to sitting down and interviewing him. He's been involved in 9 Olympic tournaments, all as an athlete, a coach, a scientist, leader. Started as a part of Canada's Olympic cycling team at the 1988 Seoul Olympic Games. And is involved with the New Zealand Olympic Committee for many years. He won international gold medals, coached world champions, research performance, created programs that contributed to Olympic medals for 3 different countries.
So in our podcast today, we want to learn and share and learn from Mr. Richard Young about what it takes to be a high performer. He describes 7 habits that medalists do better than non-medalists, and we are eager to share them with you.
Let's go over to Dr. Richard Young.
Thank you for being here today on our podcast. I'm very excited about it. I was actually a little bit nervous this morning. I told CD about it because you're such an inspiration, and I liked your webinar. It was really cool, and we had a nice chat after that. For our viewers, can you give a brief introduction of yourself before we go into the questions we have for you?
Sure. Yeah, sure. Because I saw your prompt there displayed that I'm a psychologist, and I'm not. maybe I act like one, but I'm definitely not. So my education is physiology. That's the grad stuff I did, and biomedical engineering. That was the combination of systems and people. And combining the two.
I will change that.
That's okay. That's okay. And so I got into sport through cycling. I started in judo. I fiddled around looking for the sport. I was hooked on the Olympics. I was hooked on getting to the Olympics, even as a kid. And then met my uncle who was in 3 Tour de France, and I never knew that. And we started cycling together, and hearing his stories and the racing and the sprinting and the color and everything else about the jerseys and European-based stuff and plus warm climates, cycling in the warm, being in Canada. I was interested in that. And then got into that, and then I was on the hunt and started cycling at a national level. Made the Olympic team, and then things evolved into coaching. And then I started work with the British team, setting up a technology and innovation program for them. And that's how I ended up here. I'm in New Zealand, in Dunedin in the south, in New Zealand. So I was in Auckland for a bit, setting up the tech and innovation program. And that's combining kind of Formula One and research and military into tech gear for Olympic sport. And then I got into more of the problem of high performance behaviors that deliver, and systems and behaviors and thinking that delivers exceptional performance. So that's what I've been doing for 10 years. And then I've been doing this in my own way with different people all around the world for a couple of years now. And so that's where I am.
Awesome. Yeah, so I just received your latest news bulletin, Richard, last week. And I love that BB King analogy you made in there. Music ain't the notes, man. It's space between the notes. And can you explain a little bit why it is important for student athletes, for our athletes, to pay attention to the space between the notes?
Yeah, good. Great. So a good start. We're going on a music analogy here, right on. Because sport, I say high performance sport has an addition problem that needs a subtraction solution. So the people at the top of their game have figured out a system. They know what work. They know who not to work with. They know what not to do. But they've learned that through experience. And so they have more space at the end. When they're a high performer, they have more space. And in the interviews, when I interviewed newcomers who were on their path to high performance, like young snowboarders and rugby players and judo, so all the different sports, they sounded the same. They had space. I like doing this because I love jumping. I love fighting. I love my parent or someone gets me there. I got a good coach. I don't really know what to do with nutrition, but it's all pretty simple. And then it becomes very complicated in the middle. And that's the analogy, is that there's very little space in the middle because we keep adding and looking for the magic and adding more when really we need to learn how to pull back, because that takes some deep thinking. When you cut, that's a lot of thinking. Adding is easy.
Adding is easy, and it's especially for our kids and student athletes. They do so much here, and they play, they have academics, and then they go to drama production. So how can do you have some tips for them to structure that, or to reduce that, or to create a bigger space for themselves?
Yeah, well, you can't do everything. There's fact one. So you have to pick and choose. And the hardest part for the young athlete is saying no, because, life is full of possibility and I haven't found my expertise yet. So I'm going to try this. I'm going to try that. My friends are going here. I'm going to give this sport a shot. And that's important. So it's not to say the addition part is a complete problem. It isn't. We all have to add. That's how we learn. We have to add. But it's probably thinking through, where do I want to go? Where do I really want to be in like 5 years or 10 years? And what might not be contributing to that? And they could be small things, like I don't get enough sleep. So that way my studying falls apart. It means I can't train because my marks are suffering. Well, then sleep it is. So there's looking at the components in their day that may not be contributing to performance.
Okay. I want to make sure I understand this, because I think it's a really interesting point. So when you say like they're adding, you mean they're adding complexity, right? They're saying, okay, I need nutrition. I need to get a nutritionalist. I need supplements. I need training regimen that's structured this way. In that way, they're kind of adding all these components. Is that what you mean when you're
That's
saying
right.
they're adding stuff? They're just adding layers upon layers of complexity.
And looking for magic as well.
Yeah.
So for instance, when I was working in the technology and innovation area, so I go to an Olympic sport. I had some Formula One mathematician with me. We had a cryogenic chamber opportunity. We had a carbon specialist to build new wheels, new gear. So in we go into the sport with all this fancy, really attractive looking ideas here and research. But you look around, the athletes aren't quite fit. The coach isn't sure how to plan, and they are desperate to get this stuff in because it looks like this could be a solution. And so the work really turned out to back up a bit and to help them identify what's your system. So how do you do what you do and why do you do it? And very simple questions. Before you add anything, figure out who you are, what works. And so for a student athlete, it's growing that awareness early. The athlete diary is there for a reason. Like every athlete who performs has a diary. Every athlete who performs has a coach. And so the coach is a reflector. Hey, did you notice that when you do this? How about trying this? And their diary is kind of a personal reflection, and they could separate it into going well, not going well. That's something we recommend to athletes. So young athletes, that's all. Going well, left side, right side, not going well. And just start to pay attention in your day. Oh, I keep repeating this. Look at all the stuff not going well. And I keep at it because I think I can make this work. But when you see it written down over time, you think, actually, I could put my time into something else.
But
So
does
it's
this connect?
awareness.
Yeah, exactly. So does this connect, Richard? You say in your booklet, like my routine brings me home. Is that like connected to that? That you just layer down and really look what works and what does not work?
That's right. And the best have a routine. So, and it doesn't always make the press because it's not full of innovation. It's quite stable, but they've spent years and years and years honing that. You know, just like they say, the Olympic gold was won months and years before. It was awarded on that day, but it was actually won months and years before, from them trimming and honing and testing and failing and learning and failing and learning, and but paying attention, not just continually adding, looking for the whole thing to add up. And that's what happens in the middle. People play around with efficiency and effectiveness. So they don't cut. They just say, I must be doing this wrong. I need the Covey quadrants, urgent, not urgent. It still means I do everything, but I don't do it all at once. When really it's a totally different thought process of, does all this matter? You know, everything I'm doing here, does this really matter? And that's where young athletes can benefit from that reflection, because that builds awareness, and that's the number one muscle for high performance athletes is self-awareness.
So you mentioned a little bit about Olympic medal winners and gold medal winners being won months before. And Mongolia's had some success, more so in combat sports like judo and wrestling. What's the difference between an athlete that's at that kind of medal winning caliber and somebody who's maybe just going there, they participate, they get knocked out early? Kind of what separates those two athletes who in their own rights are both, great athletes? Yeah.
Well, the result is one separator. Not to turn the question on its head, but there's just like the Olympic medalist is 1 month before, we know there's a lot of luck involved. Like things have to work out. If you're a rower and you get lane 8 and there's a crosswind, that's a problem. And so you want to be, so things have to work out. On team combat sports, weight division sports, there's a draw. And you kind of, you look to the draw thinking, could this be it? And it may be exactly the wrong draw. So certain things have to happen for the medal to appear. And so those are things out of our control, but the stuff in our control needs to be repeatable and proven to us. And often we profiled the difference between medalists and non-medalists, and there was a lot more hope. They described, non-medalists describe more hope. I hope this comes off. I hope I have a performance that I've never experienced before. Hoping for that Olympic or world championship lift, that just the event on its own is going to bring me to the fourth dimension. And you get world records and personal bests for sure, but the majority repeat what they've done before. There aren't any surprises. There's very few surprises, and they repeat what they've proven to themselves before. And there's another advantage when you go into a games and you've got proof, then your belief just turns into conviction. This isn't positive thinking anymore. This is, wow, I got months, years, weeks at this. My system is tuned. The people around me are tuned, and I've got conviction. And I happened to actually hear that word from an Olympic gold medalist in cycling. And I asked him, like, he was still breathing hard and German. I said, what makes the difference for you? Because we knew each other quite well. And I said, man, here you go again, another gold. And how's it work? And he said, Überzeugung in German. And so I had to translate it, and it means conviction. So I talked to him afterwards, and he meant conviction is more than what I believe. He said it's the whole system proving itself behind me. So all the people, the system, the support, and my proof that I've performed like this before. And I am here to repeat. And with that conviction, he said, I can produce a world record because now I can step up. I can step up on where I've ever been before. And that's where any athlete can get to, with the right system. But it starts with self-awareness. What's happening for me and what's really working.
So it's actually not hard work beats talent, but the systems beat talent, Richard. Is that maybe a better one?
Well, James Clear, Atomic Habits is quite a good book. And he said, we don't rise to the level of our goal. We fall to the level of our systems. And US military has said that. I think Greek warriors way back started with that our systems dictate the result. And systems are people. It isn't processes and IT and CRMs, and it's like this. It's people in a way of working. Culture is a system. And so it's important to define what we mean by a system. It's a whole way of working, how we do what we think about what we do, and what values are really built into what we do. That's a system that really accelerates performance.
Richard, in a recent Joe Rogan podcast, famous MMA trainer Firas Zahabi was on there, and I actually linked that with something you were saying in your book about the flow state. He talked about the flow state, and he said it is halfway between anxiety and boredom. And you mentioned that the expert or high performer has learned to be the performance itself. Can you talk a little bit more about that flow state? What does that mean for high performance?
Yeah, that's a good quote. I wrote that down. Between anxiety and boredom, that's good because MMA, that there's like gladiator stuff, isn't it? You've really you step into the unknown, which can feel to us who aren't trained in that like life or death, and so to call on flow when the risk is possible. So same for Mongolia with your combat sports, etc. There's high risk as soon as you step in. And so to be able to call on flow in those anxiety-laden times is important. And that also comes from a system. It isn't a one-off, I've never done this before, and now I feel, I feel connected. It isn't like that. There's actual buildup. And it's considered a psychological state. Some have written it's a physiological state. But what those who've experienced it say is there's a here and now, and I see where I've come from, the past, and I can see where I'm going, but I'm right here. And when you see an athlete in that, they aren't talking about it, they're doing it. And when you see an athlete in flow, like Federer at the end of he's communicating to all of us, and flow is communication, like it's a an interconnection. And then suddenly we're out of our thinking mind and we're into our reflex that we've trained. This repertoire of experience now can be unleashed. And like problems are solved, in the shower and stuff when we don't expect it. Exceptional performance is often when we don't expect it. And it just starts to happen, but it comes from months and years of growth. And those who can find it can also find the conditions to bring it on. And so they can call on flow. And there's been some fantastic studies about bringing flow, not waiting for it, but calling on flow.
Do you have any tips for maybe young athletes who haven't experienced that or have only experienced the maybe fleeting moments of it, to call on it, to kind of get into that state of mind?
That's a good question, Craig.
It's probably more than we could talk for hours on tips and
yeah. But it's experiential, and just like a novice can't act like an expert until they've got the wins under their belt. You're not an exceptional performer until you've performed. You can believe all you want, but until you've performed. So flow, until you've felt it, you just keep moving. You find your system and you keep moving towards your goal. And as your repertoire of experience starts to grow, your repetition of competition, of training, of all the experience, suddenly what looks like noise is no longer noise, and something different happens for you in an event. But it takes time and it takes experience. You know, a lot of people that are into meditation, once you get to the point where you've found a new experience, it's very attractive. And so people do more and more of it, but you can't voluntarily bring that. You have to be it. And so flow is a being state, and it just takes time. But every athlete can be assured it can happen to them, that if they keep at it, they can find the place that their expertise now frees them up, frees up their thinking, frees their behavior, and they have a flow performance.
Now, flow is that connected to being, for example, nervous before an event, Richard? Is that something that's connected, or that you can reduce that by being in a flow, knowing what's coming, being prepared?
Yeah, nervousness isn't a bad sign. You know, what we do with it is our choice, but it just means something to us. So it's coming up. It doesn't mean we're incapable. It just means something means something. Something important is coming up. And so the athlete that reframes those feelings as just feelings, and I am separate to the feeling, which is the start of flow. You know, I'm separate to what's happening. I'm in it, but I'm an observer as well as a doer, and I become the two at the same time. So so we're getting quite philosophical here, but the anxiety it can be a trigger for an important event, and the opposite can happen within the event. So very nervous, and then suddenly there's this landing place. Yeah.
All right, let's bring us back from the philosophical then. So just reading your booklet, one thing that stuck out to me was solo versus mentored, and how a lot of the great performers, they have a mentor, they have a coach. And I've often found myself wondering, you know, when you have like the greatest of all times, you know, Usain Bolt, fastest man, to Tom Brady, LeBron, whoever it is in whatever sport you're a fan of, often their coaches don't have that same the same accolades, right? Like their coaches weren't, maybe they weren't gold medalists, maybe they weren't the best. So what's the role of a coach for those athletes who are kind of going into uncharted territory? They're better than anyone's ever been before them. You know, why do they still need a coach?
Yeah. Good point. So we haven't found any repeat medalist or exceptional performer who's uncoached. And so just like Anders Ericsson's work, he was the originator of 10,000 hours, and he's written a book called Peak. And I don't know if you guys have read that, but that's worth a read, and same for your audience as well. Fantastic read. And so he's a researcher out of Florida. He's from Europe, but he's out of Florida. And he did the research on the 10,000 hours, and Malcolm Gladwell made that popular. And so you see 10,000 hours everywhere as being some sort of number that people need to achieve. And but what he researched deeper than that is the practice quality, and it's called deliberate practice. So there's purposeful, there's deliberate, and there's naive practice. And to be at the top end, you can't do it alone. So there's a couple of conditions that have to happen. And one is that the area has some history to it where exceptional performance is clear. If it's a new area, like dancing is in the Olympics, there's a lot of great performance out there, but it may not be at a high performance Olympic level yet. It may be more of a social dance structure, but not so much competition. I'm not talking out of expertise here either. I'm just making an assumption that there's work to do probably and now that it's in the Olympics, the quality, just like surfing, it's going to fly. And so there needs to be a coach from his research, and there needs to be a historical world classness to the event. You know where you're going, basically. You know what world class looks like, and you're not alone. So somebody is there to replay back to you what you're doing. And it comes back to that system we talked about. So if you're on your own and you are going about your training and your eating habits look like this, and your sleeping habits and your competition habits, and you feel, well, things are going great, and you're on your own, things are going great. You're like a fish in the sea. You can't see the sea. So you're not really sure. It may feel pretty good to you, but you're not sure if there's some things that could be a bit different. Or, hey, did you notice, like when you watch a video of yourself, you always pick something up, always. And that's the coach. So the coach is the performance reflector. And if they've been involved in world-class performance, they've got an even better eye. So you look at those top athletes and you look at the history the coach has had in that sport and what they've seen, the repertoire of experience that they can capture and translate into Usain Bolt, into a middle distance runner, into a fighter. So they've come from somewhere. So those two things from all the research as well turns out to be vital for somebody to move into an exceptional performer. Know what it takes to win and have somebody there to help guide.
Oh, that's interesting. Is it that for example, a high-level soccer team, sometimes their coaches have no experience themselves, but they're still very successful? Is it then more that he's a really good people manager or a reflector instead of a training the X's and O's of the game?
You could be exactly right. So it's a fit. So that's a system. The coach, who's a top level coach, can read the system they're in, and they integrate into the system, and then they can start to mold it and steer it to different ways. So they have a sense, is this needing a people job? And actually, they're usually hired based on a frame. What we have here is not technical, tactical. It's a total people job we need here. We've got players who know how to play the game. We need to lift them into a collective. Who's that type of coach? So you'd have a Arsene Wenger versus Mourinho, two totally different. They can still produce results because they've fit the right connection to the team. But no team would ever be unmanaged. You'd never find, any team anywhere around the world that would just say, okay, you guys know how to play, you girls know how to play, good luck. There always has to be the integrator.
Yeah, that connects really well with our programs, where we have under 11 teams, under 15 and under 19 varsity teams. And you always probably put the best X and O trainers at the younger levels, because they need that skill-based technique training, where the higher kids, they know better how to play at our level. So that's very interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I just pulled out a quote from the booklet as well, of Malcolm Gladwell, and we mentioned he kind of made the 10,000 hours much more popular, and that's where I'd heard it. But you quoted him saying, often a sign of expertise is noticing what doesn't happen. What is it? What do you mean by that, and why did you kind of pull that one out?
Yeah, so that's part of the subtraction game. As well. That there's a lot that's happened. So the Olympic medal is won months, years before, and what hasn't happened. So that's part of the work I was doing with Olympic teams, was replaying their activity and their thinking. So you have a coach that does that. They would replay certain aspects of the performance or the training, or, the demeanor. You need to eyeball the athlete and see how they, what's their posture like? Doesn't look like they're ready for 100% today. Those coaches are the ones reading the situation. And so when you've been in the game a long time, you're able to do that. And the expert is the performer. And because you can't see the system you're in, when it's replayed to you, just the patterns of your behavior, like the athlete diary, what's going well, not going well, that's basically what we did. And I did repeated samples on the way to the Olympics, and then debrief them afterwards. And then would feed them information about what they're doing. Have you noticed this pattern of your nutrition? You say it isn't going well and you don't know what to do with your supplements. And this has been going on for 3 months now. Have you noticed 3 months? 3 months I've been battling with nutrition. And have you talked to your nutritionist? Well, no, but here's a barrier that they forgot because they're busy at it, and performers are busy. Your student athletes are busy. So you can't always, like Hansel and Gretel, look back and see what the breadcrumb trail is. And so we'd replay that to people, and they'd look back, and because they get the context, they knew what to do. And they'd say, right, I'm going to shift this, I'm going to shift that. Then we'd say, and by the way, everybody else on your team, they're struggling with this. They're involved in this. Really? Are they? Oh, they're trying that. Okay. I got to talk to them about that. And by the way, the other sports that are at your level in the world are focused on this. Really? And the water sports are doing this, and the combat sports are doing this. Wow. And so when you get to the Olympics, now you've got the Hansel Gretel breadcrumb trail. And if they lost, and you know what it's like, you interview somebody after a loss, and oh, he got it wrong. My coach never did this, and I wasn't given this, and it's been a lot of. And then the ones that won, you know, they put really good stories together. It's unintentional, but our brain is built to connect the dots. And so we wanted to kind of double check the story, because in high performance, you need the truth. And just like, you know, the police asked multiple times, and what did you see? I already told you that. Yeah, but just repeat it. And so the more you repeat, the more you can find these little nuances. And that's where we target in high performance. And that's what it was making what they were dropping visible. So what you don't see and what they're doing visible. And then suddenly they had a breadcrumb trail of how they got to where they got to.
Is the role of the coach in that reality versus future check-in important, or can the athlete do that themselves too? Are there tools tricks that they can do that themselves, or do you need a coach for that?
So the coach isn't there for absolutely everything, you know, like a parent, eventually the kid leaves the house. And so the coach is building an athlete who can think for themselves, who can feel for themselves, who knows reality and can lead. So when, like rugby, when they're on the pitch, you look where the coach is, way up there, way out of reach. Hockey, they're in the dugout, and suddenly they've got no walkie-talkie anymore. It's now over to you. And so all of that prep of giving the athletes the leadership skills to make the decisions, because they're in it, that's important. So a coach prompts that. That's what they're training for. Not only the performance, but the kind of person who's going to deliver that performance. So that's the other point, Jeff, on the coach, is that they help steer you into the type of person you need to be an exceptional performer, not just the performance.
You mentioned a couple times the diary and kind of keeping that going. Could you kind of just detail that a little more for any student athletes that are maybe watching or listening, and how they could do that, what they should write down, what they should keep track of?
Yeah. So on one page, and if you do it every day and try for a week and just see what pops up for you, and try just a grid, enablers and barriers. So it's going well, and choose a goal. So it may be your sport, it may be your school. Eventually they'll merge, is what the athlete's going to find, because your whole ecosystem counts. That's what the high performers realize. If my car doesn't work, I can't get to training. It all counts. You know, if I'm not getting along with everybody I live with, it all counts. It all adds to performance. So, but if you start with enablers and barriers, and this is going well, this isn't going well, and then have a look on a Saturday, start on a Monday, have a look on the Saturday, and go through the pages and just have a look. What do you notice? What's consistently going well and what's consistently not going well? And after a week, try 3 new questions. Keep that going, but 3 additional questions, not new. What will you keep, start, and stop? And so based on what I've learned about my last week on the Saturday, what am I going to keep, start, and stop? So a commitment to yourself. Keep, start, and stop for the next week. And then you keep the enablers, barriers going. Look to see, did you keep what you said you're going to keep? Did you stop? Those few questions asked repeatedly. And so we did that for Olympic teams, exactly those questions. And then when you get to the review and closer to the games, there's a couple others, but for the gist of keeping it simple for the athlete population you've got, they start there and they start to figure out some patterns. And then they start to figure out reasons for the patterns. Like, why is this pattern happening? That's their next question. That's turning into a high performer. High performers ask the next question. So they've got the data, they've got the patterns, they've got a commitment to themselves, keep, start, stop. And now they say, wow, why is it happening this way? And what do I need to change? And so over time, the patterns start to tell them something deeper about what they think is working. Because every day they're voting high performance. We're all in our own way. Every minute making a vote with our time and our attention of what high performance looks like to us. And so when they replay and they can see going well, not going well, and you suddenly realize I've got a lot of authority in this. I've got a lot of control of quite a lot of this stuff. It's not just circumstance here. You know, I'm voting with my time. And so how could I vote a little bit differently? A self-awareness. And they just start to shift. But yeah, start small. That's my advice.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, because some of the higher performers that I've had, they kind of naturally do that. You can see they're very reflective, just not so much even just writing it down as that structured, but just in the way they think about their games, their practices. You can see that they're processing that information. And so I think that'd be a great way to kind of reach some of those kids who maybe have the physical talent, but they're not quite there on their own mentally. And maybe they don't have that growth mindset, right? That they don't realize that they have so much control over all these different aspects of their life. You know, that'd be
That's great. Yeah, that's an awareness that is, that brings a lot of freedom. Just what you said. Yeah, and that can come from that diary setup.
Yeah, and for us, hopefully curb some of the it was the ref's fault, I got cheated, you know, as they start to realize that they're more and more in control of their own destiny in that way.
Yeah.
Richard, we work a lot with trying, if the students, if we lose games, you know, that resilience, that learning from experience, learning from losing, what do you do with your athletes if they lose at the Olympics? Or are there any tips and tricks for our student athletes to cope with that?
Yeah, well, the same questions help. You know, when you've got a frame and you can apply it to different circumstance, so enablers, barriers, that type of setup. But as much learning needs to come from the win as the loss. And sometimes in teams, you know, it's all hands on deck. If there's a loss, it's like like a public inquiry, you know. There are sports where they've hired judges and the reviews are enormous and expensive and looking for all the details, but it happened months before. And you can't find that after the games. So every loss is telling us something that our system needs a tweak. And part of it is circumstance, like lane 8. Okay, well, I need to know, my time was bad because crosswind in lane 8, or the other person in my weight division was right at the top of his weight. I was right at the bottom, and it made a bigger difference than I thought. So there's circumstance and there's my control. And so when you learn from your loss as much as your win on the system that's created this and my own responsibility, what did I do? You know, like the old, what did I do to deserve this? So all the highest performers ask, what's my responsibility in this? Not the ref. It may be the ref, but something happened before the ref made the call, even if the call was a mistake. What can I still learn from this episode? So, like I think I mentioned the Mai Drysdale quote, the rower, and he, multiple gold at Olympics, multiple gold at the World Championships, world record, single scull rower. And at the Olympics in Beijing, he was ill and he got a bronze. And the interviewer said, "Oh, Mai, you must be really disappointed with that." And he said, "Yes, I am." And he said, "So I guess you're going to, really work hard on being healthy for the next games." And he said, "No, I'm going to work hard on being so fit I can win when I'm sick." And so on the creation versus fixing, there's an example. On the learn from loss, okay, what can I control? My health, I tried to arrive healthy. It didn't work. So this could happen again. Yep. So what's in my control? Train harder. Okay, that's what I'm going to create. For the next Olympics, that's what I create. Yeah.
Yeah, that's usually my response to athletes who are trying to blame the ref or trying to blame circumstance. If the ref decided if the ref's decision cost you the win or the loss, well, then you should have scored more points where their decision didn't affect the outcome. So we need to practice more, and so usually that works to try to reframe it and hopefully get the focus back on, what can we do? How can we be better?
Yeah.
So that way,
exactly.
Like you said, those circumstances that are going to happen don't affect the outcome.
Absolutely. And when you do that, Craig, you find the athletes are empowered. It isn't, I hope the circumstance works out next time. It's I arrive. Flow is empowerment. And so all these things add up. The more you feel this sense of empowerment, the more the circumstance lightens. And eventually when it's time, you've got the experience, the repertoire, the event, this boom, you land, and suddenly it's, wow, this is going to be something else.
So we're going close to the end, Richard, but I really enjoyed your equation that you wrote down. Beliefs plus habits plus actions are medalists. That actually summarizes a lot of those things, believe in yourself, the habits, the systems, and the actions you do on a daily basis, writing those notes down. I think that's a great equation for our kids to follow and to look at that every day.
Yeah. I'm with you. That's proven that the beliefs on their own without proof it's a tricky zone. You're in kind of, because especially new performers, they don't yet have the proof. But to be aware of my belief is really important. Can I do this? Or can I, like Carol Dweck's growth mindset versus fixed mindset? Like a division between the two is, am I here to improve or am I here to prove? So am I trying to prove something to somebody or am I trying to improve? And as you check your beliefs, you figure out, like, we're all different and we vary. So, sometimes, I'm going to prove it to this guy. Or, pressure's off. I just want to get really good. I'm going to get better. And when you map your beliefs, you can start to see where you are and when your performance changes accordingly. The improve, performance goes. Prove can only last for so long. That need to prove to somebody else, it can't carry you for the long game. But the learning, I want to learn. I'm going to form habits that learn. And that high performer is onto the exceptional path.
Like as Jeff mentioned, we're coming to the end. So what are I'm curious if we can just get some kind of bite-sized tips or tricks. Not that we're always looking for the easiest way out, but what are some things that our student athletes can do and kind of implement in their lives to just improve overall in their sports and in their life, and hopefully see a little bit more success?
Yep. Well, summaries are important for people because it's action, right? So performance is all action. It's not just thinking. So what would they do? So I think the diary is one thing that an athlete could do. The benefit of that is the self-awareness that we talked about. There's a lot that's built in to that short diary. And the other thing is to look at what you're adding and what you're taking away, because everything you add means you're subtracting something else. So it isn't just a deliberate subtraction. You know, I've reduced this, I've reduced this. Everything you add, something else has to give space for it. So it's either something you're already doing or something that you're not going to do as a result. So another grid is that plus minus, and just pay attention. So the gist of it, Craig, is self-awareness, and how ask the questions in the diary and pay attention to what you're adding, what you're subtracting. And as that adds up, you start to figure out this system. There's a whole new vision you start to arrive at in how you're voting with your time. You start to have the right questions of yourself. You have the right questions of your coach. What your coach says starts to make sense because now you've been tracking patterns, not just your coach. You're doing it too. And then your relationship starts to change. Your hints to the team, you know, you find you're escalating to a captain because now you see a bigger picture. And it all starts with you. So this athlete, the ones listening now, it starts with them. Personal responsibility for them to become aware of what they're doing and how they're voting.
That's great.
Richard, yeah, thank you so much for sharing this, because our podcast is all about sports, teach you life skills. We always talk, the medals are not important. Of course, at the Olympic level, they are important, but these kind of tips and tricks, they help the kids to become high performers in their life, in everything they want to do. So I want to thank you so much for sharing this today with us. For any students, student athletes or coaches or athletic directors or any other viewers watching our podcast, where can they find more about what you're doing, your company and your company?
So there's a website, and that's simplify2perform.com. Simplify2perform. And that has the performance posts. There's a couple of download papers, one on how to think inside the box, very similar to what we've talked about. So that will give them some hints and tips. And then the other is the comparison of medalists and non-medalists and behaviors, which are principles of success. And then there's a webinar that I run every month. That's how we connected, Jeff.
Yeah.
And so that runs, and if anybody, that's free. So anybody can register and have a listen.
Well, that's awesome. A lot of this stuff, you know, the goal is to help our student athletes, but you know, even personally, just in the day to day, I think a lot of the stuff will help me. So no, it's been great, Richard. I definitely appreciate the time you've given us and a lot of the insights as well.
Oh, it's a pleasure, you guys. Pleasure. I love the topic, you know, athletics for life, and it's true. And that's what I say about the bigger game. We're really in a bigger game in sport. It isn't just a medal. It's something much bigger. And and in May I have a book coming out, and the High Performers Playbook, which is the system behind exceptional performance. So that goes into quite a few of the things in more detail, which viewers may be interested in.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Richard. That's awesome.
Okay, pleasure, Jeff. Pleasure, Craig.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Richard.
Thank you so much.
Great work. Okay, and all the best Mongolia at the games.
Yeah. Fingers crossed.
All right.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
All the best.
See you. Thank you so much, Richard. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right. So we just sat down with Dr. Richard Young. Great interview. He's got a ton of experience working with high-level athletes and trying to figure out what makes them tick. And what was interesting for me is just he kept coming back to systems, you know, and a couple other podcasts or interviews we've done. And people have mentioned how important it is to get systems in place, and you know the way that we do things, and you know with Richard, it just how important those systems are, and he mentioned too that the systems aren't just the processes, but they're the people you have around you, right? So it's your coaches, it's your nutritionists, it's you know, even your family and your teammates and everybody around you that kind of puts into how do you do the things you do that make you successful?
Yeah.
And so just, having those systems in place that can allow you to then excel at whatever it is you're doing. So it's just kind of interesting that keeps popping up, in multiple interviews that we've done.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. System. It comes back every podcast almost.
Yeah.
But, I'm very honored and humbled that we have him on the podcast today. I just contacted him. I saw a webinar, had an extra chat, and then he's here on the podcast. Thank you so much, Richard, for being here today and sharing your experiences. The takeaway from me was to really simplify things. Every morning, take 15 minutes just to organize your day, and then you have more time during the day to do things with intention. Start the day well. That's something for me to take away. Doing it simple, make life simple for yourself, and you got so much more time to get into that flow state that you're just going through the day with doing things with intention, and then you become a more high performer. It's great stuff from Richard, especially the tips for our athletes. I really enjoyed them.
Yeah, I think just keeping a simple diary like that, what's going well, what's not going well, can really help people just start to reflect, right? You start to pick up the bread trail trum, like you mentioned. These are the things that I have been struggling with for a while. That's probably why, I'm not performing the way I wanted to perform. I haven't been eating well. I haven't been sleeping well, whatever the case may be. And like you said, it just kind of gives you a way to then move forward with intention. So instead of things just happening to you and you just, I think we see a lot of kids go through that, right? Where they go to class and they just do. And it's all these things that they're just doing. There's not really intention behind what they're doing. They're just going through life, right? It's just something that's happening to them, where if they could then stop and reflect on the things that are happening and then understand the why are these things happening, then that can really help a lot of our student athletes, in the classroom, on the basketball court, just be more successful in general.
Find those people who can mentor you, who know more than you, who have that experience. Be real with yourself. What can I improve on? Be real. And that's very hard in these days, just to be honest with yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just to say sometimes, I'm not good at this, so I have to work harder. Believe, that whole equation, belief plus habits plus action is a high performer. So you have to put the effort in, you have to find the system, the habits, and you have to believe in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And those three together will bring you to the next level. So if you want to know more about Richard, he shared his information. We will add everything in our description, the websites, where to find him. Follow a webinar. It's very interesting what he has to say. And we try to invite him for future events here in our own division. So thank you so much, Richard, for being on our podcast today.
Yeah, that website was, I got it right in front of me, Simplify to Perform, and the 2 was the number 2. So simplifytoperform.com. Definitely check that out. Thanks again, Richard. Much appreciated for your time and your insights.
Yeah, that's our podcast for today.
Thanks.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Take care. See ya.